What's up, y'all? It's GC Kinsey, here to share 5 ways that being a cosplayer helped make my gender transition a little bit easier. I use this channel to talk about queer stuff and to share a lot of my cosplay content, so for this video I thought I would bring both of those things together. So here I am in cosplay as one of my favorite characters and gay icons, Spock, to talk about how this particular passion of mine has helped with my transition. It's only logical, right? Just for context, I started cosplaying in 2013, and my very first cosplay, and still one of the most fun ones to wear, was Beetlejuice. And despite being the ripe old age of 25 at my first Comic-Con, I've always been the kind of person who enjoys dressing up, doing theater, going all out for Halloween, that kind of stuff. I just didn't have the time or the budget to really get into cosplay until I was well past my high school and even college years. And the timeline for my transition was similar. I started actively questioning my gender and beginning my social transition in 2017 at the even riper old age of 29. And similar to cosplay and how I'd always enjoyed dressing up, when it came to gender, I'd also always enjoyed playing around with self-expression. I've been engaging in gender f***ery since I was very young, and a lot of that has actually gone hand in hand with dressing up. Cosplay is one of those art forms like theater or drag or other performing arts that gives people an almost built-in way to explore their gender, and I'll probably make a whole other video just about that. But for this one, I want to focus on 5 specific things that cosplay did to help make my transition go more smoothly. So, let's get into it. Number 1. Cosplay put the first crack in my egg. I started cosplay with crossplay, or at least that's how I thought of it at the time. It wasn't really intentional, I just cosplayed the characters that I gravitated toward and wanted to look like. And those characters overwhelmingly happened to be dudes. After I cosplayed Beetlejuice, my next character was the Winter Soldier, and when Captain America Civil War came out, I knew I wanted to cosplay that version of Bucky too. But I didn't think I could make it a convincing enough crossplay without the beard scruff that Bucky has, so I found a tutorial and learned how to apply that with fiber mascara. I was expecting the beard to make me happier with how my cosplay looked. I wasn't expecting it to make me so much happier with how I looked and felt, both in and out of that cosplay. But that's exactly what happened. Wearing that beard gave me a ton of gender euphoria out of nowhere. At the time, I didn't really know what that feeling was or what to do with it. But looking back, I definitely see wearing the beard for that Bucky Barnes cosplay as a major line in the sand for me. It was the thing that put the first crack in my egg. And you can tell just how important it was by how much I've talked about it on this channel. I've taken a deeper dive into my feelings about that moment in 2 of my other videos, one about untangling femininity and fabulosity, which I posted back in 2021, and also in my most recent video about my questioning journeys. So I'm not going to repeat everything I said in those videos here, but what I do want to add is some emphasis on the fact that it was cosplay that led me to discover what my gender really was. Sometimes I wonder if, without cosplay, I would still be stuck in that place I was in before my egg cracked, where I was dealing with a ton of issues with my body and a vague sense of unease around a lot of the gendered parts of society, but I just didn't realize that being trans was the reason I felt that way. I think I would have figured it out one way or another eventually, but without cosplay giving me a reason to try on that beard for the first time, it probably would have taken even longer than it did. And that leads me to the next way that cosplay helped with my transition. Number 2. Conventions gave me a safe place to experiment with gender expression. If you've ever been to a comic or anime convention or any other fandom event where cosplay happens, you probably know that gender norms go all the way out the window in those spaces. It is very common to see a wide variety of gender expressions among cosplayers. At any given con, you'll find cosplayers changing their own gender presentation to match the gender of their character, known as crossplay, or changing a character's gender to align with their own, known as genderbend. You might even find cosplayers doing drag or other forms of gender play with their characters. And what is absolutely beautiful about this is that if you're questioning or exploring your gender, you can try out all sorts of different gender expressions and not get the same weird looks at a con that you would get in any other public space. You might even get positive attention instead, which can be a major confidence booster. I can walk across the con floor dressed as Frankenfurter and have my confidence soar. I could never do that on the street. I would be way too fearful for my safety. So having a place like cons where I could do that safely was extremely helpful to me, especially when I was questioning my gender and entering into the early phases of social transition. Cosplay had already cracked my egg, so the next logical step was to keep using cosplay to explore my gender and figure out how I wanted to be perceived in a gendered way. And although doing this has sometimes led to some awkward moments, like when people misinterpret what I'm going for and respond to my cosplays in a way that make me feel dysphoric, for the most part it has been a fantastic experience. For whatever reason, nerd culture tends to attract a lot of queer people, so our numbers tend to be higher at cons than in the general population. And I think that also contributes to making cons such a welcoming space for people to explore gender expression. Which leads me to another way cosplay helped with my transition. Number 3. The cosplay community introduced me to other trans people. Before I got into cosplay, I had hardly met any trans people. I was friends with a lot of cis queer people, but somehow I just wasn't crossing paths with trans people, at least not ones who were open about it. I knew of trans people, of course, from watching documentaries on TV or seeing celebrities come out as trans, and I'd had some brief interactions with trans people online, but I didn't have any trans friends or even acquaintances in person. Until I started cosplaying and going to cons and getting involved in my local cosplay charity scene, and suddenly I found myself meeting more trans people than I even knew existed in the world. Knowing other trans people makes a big difference, so it was incredible to go from not knowing any other trans people to suddenly meeting tons of them and even making trans friends. Every time I talked to another trans person, it helped cement my own gender feelings as more legitimate and real. I had deep conversations with other people who were using cosplay in the same way I was, to explore their feelings around gender and test out different gender expressions. I first started trying out my new pronouns at cons with the support of other trans cosplayers. I now have multiple trans and non-binary people in my closest circle of friends, and we would have never even met if it wasn't for cosplay. How freaking cool is that? Okay, next up is number 4. Cosplay taught me to tailor or even make my own clothes. If you've ever bought clothing at a department store, then you probably know just how ill-fitting mass-produced fashion is on everyone's bodies. Even if you're dealing with more specific sizing than just small, medium, large, X large, etc., those sizes are still like one size fits none. There is just too much variety among human bodies for mass-produced clothing to fit anyone perfectly, or even well. And if you're trans, you're likely even more aware of this issue than most, because mass-produced clothing is designed with cis bodies in mind and it doesn't even fit them, so of course it's not going to fit us. Which is why cosplay was such a game changer, because it gave me the sewing skills I needed to tailor my clothes. And when you do that, you can make sure that not only do your clothes fit, but they also flatter your body. Emphasize the features that give you gender euphoria, minimize the features that give you gender dysphoria, and make you feel overall more confident in how you're dressed. Since I've started cosplaying, it's pretty rare that I've worn any store-bought clothing without adjusting seams or adding darts or making some kind of alterations to help it fit better. And that's not something I had the confidence to do to clothing I had paid good money for before I started cosplaying. But now I just tell myself, if I can make something as complex as a figure skating costume or a swimsuit or a replica of an outfit from The Untamed, then surely I can tailor that new vest I just bought, right? Or even make one from scratch. I do want to acknowledge here that being a cosplayer doesn't automatically mean you're a sewist. There are cosplayers who focus on armor building and prop making and wigs and makeup and all kinds of other skills and don't know how to sew at all. But if you're trans and you get into cosplay and you do learn how to sew, I can tell you from personal experience that that is a skill that will also help you a lot in your day-to-day life. And that leads me to the final way that cosplay helped with my transition. Number 5. Sewing eliminated my fear of needles. When I was a kid, I was really scared of needles, and if you have that same fear, you might want to skip this section of the video. It was a struggle to get me vaccinated for kindergarten at age 5, and I had to have a lot of help staying calm enough to get blood drawn the first time I needed lab work done at age 8. And I tended to get super nervous and even dizzy or faint whenever I needed a shot or blood work done after that. Now, for those of us who are transitioning hormonally with testosterone, myself included, one of the things we learn is that although there are different methods of administering testosterone, such as gel or patches, the most affordable method tends to be injections. And that might put you in a bit of a tough spot if you have a fear of needles. Fortunately, sewing got me over that fear long before I even had any inkling I was trans. I had my first introduction to sewing in middle school where I learned to do all kinds of decorative hand stitching, including cross-stitching, beading, and embroidery. And that really helped me find needles less intimidating because if you do any kind of hand sewing, you will poke your fingers over and over. It doesn't matter how careful you are, it doesn't matter if you wear a thimble, it still happens. And I only got more desensitized to needles when I started machine sewing for cosplay. My Winter Soldier cosplay was my first big sewing project, and that involved machine sewing and hand sewing pleather. And let's just say I'm glad that material is black because I definitely got blood on it several times from needle pokes. Since then, I have accidentally sewn into my finger on the machine, hooked my lace ventilating needle into my thigh, and run an embroidery needle right under my fingernail more than once. Needles don't even faze me anymore, which makes doing my weekly testosterone shot an absolute breeze. I could barely even feel that tiny 23 gauge needle going in. I wish I could say the same thing for my sewing needles. What I can say is thank goodness for sewing and cosplay for helping me to get over that fear. And that wraps up my list of 5 ways that cosplay helped make my transition easier. I know a lot of the trans content on this channel can get pretty heavy sometimes, so I hope you enjoyed something more lighthearted like this one. And now is where I want to turn the conversation over to you. If you're a fellow trans cosplayer, has cosplay helped your transition at all, or do you keep those parts of your life more separate? If you're trans but not a cosplayer, are there other hobbies or activities that have helped make your transition go more smoothly? If you're a cosplayer but not trans, how has cosplay helped with some other aspect of your life? I would love to hear from you, so drop a comment below and let's get a discussion going. You can also reach out to me on other social media. I am GC Kinsey across all platforms. And while you're here, feel free to check out some of my other videos. If you're interested in more of the trans side of things, I've got more vlogs like this one about my experiences as a queer person. If you're more interested in seeing the cosplay side of things, I have cosplay music videos and makeup demos. I've also got pre-testosterone voice recordings and a lot of other cool music stuff right here on this channel. So make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss anything new. And with that, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all of your support. I hope you enjoyed this one and that you learned something, and I will see you on the next one. Live long and prosper.